We acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional owners of the land and seas of Australia. We pay our deep respect to elders past, present, and emerging. As a lawyer working with people in solitary confinement, I have seen it take away people's humanity. At its worst, I have seen it take away people's lives. We acknowledge the recent deaths in custody in Queensland and the family and friends of those people. We acknowledge the people being held in solitary confinement, and we dedicate this research to them. Solitary confinement is a practice that can and has to end.
We are so pleased to announce the release of our new report, Legal Perspectives on Solitary Confinement in Queensland, Australia. This report is the result of a collaboration between the Prisoners Legal Service and the University of Queensland Law School. You're about to hear from both local and international experts on why this research is so important and why it is so important that we abolish solitary confinement in Queensland prisons.
We actually destroy human beings when they're actually placed in solitary confinement. We are actually slowly killing those individuals through systematic torture.
I think Special Rapporteur Mendez put this very succinctly. Any solitary confinement longer than 14 days is torture. So we want to make sure that the things we do to them in prison, meaning the conditions, the crowding, the social isolation, that kind of thing, and the programs we give them actually serve to make them law-abiding citizens who can be productive and socially relevant when they get out of prison. That should be our main concern. In that regard, solitary confinement is one of the worst things we could have ever invented. So they paint the picture of very heinous criminals, the worst of the worst that they put in solitary. The truth is, in my tours in maybe more than 20 states in the United States, of supermax prisons, which is basically either a cell block or a prison that's dedicated to solitary confinement, I haven't found the worst of the worst. I have not found the super predators. What I have found is people with very serious mental illness, and prison authorities tend to take people with mental illness who they don't know what to do with. I mean, they're at the end of their wits and they don't know how to treat them. They don't have the budget and they don't bring in people with the expertise to treat them. Instead, they put them in the hole, which is what a solitary cell is called, and forget about them. And there, they're going to deteriorate rapidly.
We'll see more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women in solitary confinement than you would see white women. The white women that are in solitary confinement are usually the women with severe mental illnesses or intellectual disabilities. They're concrete cells, they're small cells, you don't have mattresses, there's nothing in there. So it's just a stripped, empty cell that you cannot see outside. You'll have a slot, you can't see anyone. So, you know, that's what you're left with. You can't have anything in there with you. When you're given food, if you're given food, it's usually sandwiches, you know, on plastic, maybe not even plastic. So you're actually left in that stripped, isolated, empty, dark cell, you know, minute after minute after minute after hour after day after day. And usually the lights are on, you know, the whole time. It's difficult to know when it's day and when it's night, so everything blurs into one. So it's difficult then to have a routine. Like, we all need a routine to survive. If you can think of the most deepest, darkest place you've ever been in your life, if you can think of the most traumatic thing you've ever been in your life and multiply that by 1,000, you might get there. And the worst fear is that you're never going to get out.
And here's what happens. For relatively stable people, that is, people who we can document entered solitary confinement, in a relatively mentally healthy state, they experience intense anxiety, which can take the form of panic reactions. They have trouble thinking, and the trouble thinking, what we call a thought disorder, can take the form of paranoid thinking. They have trouble concentrating. They have trouble with their memory. Now, everything I've said so far is happening in people who are relatively stable when they enter solitary. Anybody with a mental illness or a proclivity to develop a mental illness, the effect of solitary is to greatly exacerbate the mental illness. So I find people in solitary with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, that are some of the most severe cases of these disorders that I've ever seen in my psychiatric career. Suicide is a prominent problem. There is a stunning statistic that of all successful prison suicides in the United States, 50% occur among the 2 or 4 or 6% of the population who are in solitary at any given time. The effect of solitary is so dreadful and causes so much severe disturbance that, for instance, to give someone medication while they're in a solitary cell just doesn't work. And when you deprive people of relationships with others, which is what solitary is designed to do, I call it the decimation of life skills. That is, they start to forget how to relate. The large majority of people in solitary, if they were provided adequate mental health treatment, that is, they were given someone who's sympathetic and caring to talk to, and they were given whatever medications they might need, and they were removed from solitary and put in a decent human place where they can participate in social activities, where they can do sort of the usual activities of daily life. A large majority of them are going to do well. You have to have programs. The key thing about the program is it does take some social services to rehabilitate people who have been broken by solitary confinement. That's true. There's costs involved. I would just point out that the costs are not as great as it would cost to keep them in solitary, both for the running of the solitary unit, also for the ongoing damage that becomes incrementally worse.
That's when I had this idea of showing nature videos to the inmates in solitary confinement who I can't give them access to real nature. After a year, we came back and we did surveys of the inmates and of the staff. And we asked, how did you feel when you were watching the videos? Could you bring this emotion, this more calmed emotion, back to the cell block? And we found it was really all positive. The men said, I felt calmer, I felt more under control, I felt less violent. And when I left and went back to my cell, I felt calmer as well. I could imagine those images. It reminded me of my dad. We went hunting when I was a kid. It made me connected more to the outside world. It made me think, oh, it's still out there. And the staff people, the officers, corroborated this. They said, yes, these guys seem more calm. I think there are a lot of different theories. I think the primary one is the simple theory of biophilia, that humans have an innate connection to nature. And when it is blocked from us, we experience stress and we experience anxiety. And when we are provided with access to it, even if it's just nature imagery, there's a relief, there's a sense of reconnection with something that's very important to us. I think we all can contribute to bringing down this monster of solitary confinement in different ways. And some of us are lawyers, and some of us are prison abolitionists, and some of us are ecologists, some of us are artists, and some of us are families of these people. And that's all we can do. And I think it's just great that we're all trying in our own way to battle this ugliest part of humanity, I think.